Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about how to land and leverage a TEDx talk. My special guest today is Frank King. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Thank you, Jane. And before you go any farther, I want to clear something up.
Oh,
I heard a phrase years ago, and I believe it is your wording. I think somebody was a student of yours,
mm-hmm.
and the phrase is "pick a lane," and I've attributed that to you ever since. I think that is your.
It's been in my book, and I got the phrase from Joe Calloway, who generously loaned it to me for the Wealthy Speaker. And we have used it here in the halls of the Wealthy Speaker School now for many, many years because it makes sense to pick a lane. And so we're going to talk about your lane, but give me the today snapshot of your business model. What does your business look like today? I know you're a TEDx coach, but you also do other things. Tell me the big picture, and then we're going to take a step and go backwards.
Okay. What I do today, obviously, is I'm a TEDx coach and I'm a professional speaker. And I speak on suicide prevention as a workplace and college health and safety issue. That is my lane.
Yeah.
And I picked it in part because you suggested that. I mean, I'd heard that from him years ago. I'm a slow learner, Jane. So 2018, January 1st, I thought from this point forward, I am simply a suicide prevention speaker. I have other speeches, and if they want to pay me for them, or if I can toss it in as a breakout in the afternoon to give the meeting planner some additional, like 2 slots for one speaking fee and one travel, I'll do that. Or I'll do stand-up comedy at the banquet, or I'll auctioneer at the charity. But all I pitch, all I do, my lane is suicide prevention speaking. And the reason I chose it, but besides you, is I looked around my town at the people who were most successful, trying to figure out what they had in common. One owns a body shop, one owns 2 radio stations. They're very successful. What's the common element? And I realized they do one thing and they do it extremely well.
Yeah.
And they're no longer a commodity in those businesses. When someone looks for a body shop, they're not looking for any body shop. They're looking for Todd's Auto Body
Yeah.
because he is no longer a commodity. They come looking for him. And that's what I tell my speaker coaching clients. Eventually, you want to be not a commodity on your topic in the speaking business. When they want somebody like you, they want you.
They want
And they
you.
come looking. And it's happened a couple of times. And because I picked the lane and because I've worked very hard to make that my lane, my brand.
Right.
And I took it a step farther. I also decided I needed to figure out who my ideal clients are. So my marketing wouldn't be spray and pray. Not everybody needs suicide prevention.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked half dozen of the top 10 at-risk occupations for suicide: construction, mining, excavation, fishing, farming, forestry, dentists, veterinarians, attorneys, and agriculture. And I picked 6 of those. And that's the only people I only market to those 6 groups. And it makes the sales process a lot simpler because if they contact me, I don't have to convince them that suicide prevention is a great idea.
They already
They know that. All they're doing is trying to figure out which suicide prevention speaker they're going to pick.
Which isn't a bad idea when you're thinking about who your markets. And we suggest, by the way, 3 markets, 6,
Mhm.
6, you know how difficult it is to go really deep into any one industry. And so there's a lot of room to play in there. So that's why we kind of choose 3. And some of our clients even choose 1 market, which I think is
Yes.
fine. You could do suicide prevention for dentists or one of those groups that you mentioned if you wanted to, but I can see where going broad is important. Now, we're diving into the business stuff, but I do want to do a little detour for a second here to talk about how you landed on this topic. You gave me a story to be in the Wealthy Speaker 3.0, and it's a very deep story, and you have a comedy background. And so I don't want to. I want to take this part of the story as with as much seriousness as we need to. And this is something that isn't. I have one of my best friends. Her daughter has suicidal thoughts and tendencies frequently. Every time the phone rings, she doesn't know what she's going to get. And so I'm kind of like feeling this with you. And for anybody who's listening, please tell your story of how you landed here.
Started comedy April 1st, 1984, my first open mic night. Got on stage. Halfway through my set, I heard this inside my head: "You're home." And I'd known I wanted to be a comedian since fourth grade.
Hmm.
And so I decided I was going to be a professional comedian. Had no idea how, but a year and a half later, said to my girlfriend, now my wife, 35 years, I'm going on the road to be a stand-up comedian full time. Do you want to come along? Figuring she'd go, oh, hell no. And she goes, yes. So we were on the road together with no home for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop.
Wait, let me write that down. 2000.
2,629 nights,
Whoa. That's
7 years and change. And worked with Dennis Miller, Foxworthy, Ellen DeGeneres, Rosie, Steve Harvey, Adam Sandler, back when they were just comics. And I did that until I got a job in radio in Raleigh, about 7, 8, I guess 10 years later.
hmm
And as most people in radio will tell you, there are two kinds of people in radio: people who've been fired and people who are going to be fired. I took a #1 morning show and drove it to #6 in 18 months. I didn't just drive it in the ground, I drove it in the Middle Earth. So by then, the comedy club boom busted. And I thought, well, I'm a clean comic. I could do corporate comedy, the rubber chicken circuit, conferences. Every now and then, one of my aging comedian friends says, what's the difference between a club comic and a corporate comic? About $5,000 a night plus travel.
and
And
let me just put in a word for the rubber chicken circuit is typically free in our world, but you're talking about a different kind of rubber chicken circuit.
oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. You were getting paid. Okay.
Oh, yes. $5,000 for 45 minutes. I mean, it was, and a meeting planner would say to me, wait a minute, we're paying you $5,000 for 45 minutes of just jokes. And I would say, look, you're not paying me for the 45 minutes of jokes I tell. You're paying me for the 45 minutes of jokes I don't tell. You're paying me so when I get done my job, you still have a job. That resonates with meeting planners.
Right.
If you put a mic in a comic's hand, boom.
Okay.
So I rode that horse until about 2007, 8 recession hits. Bookings drop off 80%.
Okay.
We had some negative cash flow, a house payment about $2,300 a month, just couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
And so filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy, lost everything we worked for in 25 years.
Wow.
And that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like, literally. In my keynote, I say, spoiler alert, I didn't pull the trigger,
Yeah.
which gets a nervous laugh. I go, it's okay to laugh.
And I think laughter is how we, kind of lighten up a moment that is very, very serious in what you're talking about.
Yes, there's a reason they call it comic relief, Jane. It's and there's a psychological principle. If you have a piece of serious business,
Yeah.
and then you follow it with some comic relief, their brain is much better prepared for the next piece of serious business. Because 45 minutes of death and dying and suicide and whatever is tough to take without something.
Yes, it's got to have some balance to it so that people don't feel so just dark and heavy, right?
Yes, and as a speaker, I like to move them from laughter to tears to laughter to tears. A woman in Iowa last June, after I did my keynote, came up and said, you made me laugh twice and cry once. I said, my work is done. Because you know what they say, Jane. They may not remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And so I like to move the audience that way.
What advice do you have to someone out there? And we won't go heavily down this path, but what advice do you have for someone who's out there who is going through some dark times right in this moment?
I would first get a mental health evaluation. Just be evaluated. Find out if it is simple garden variety depression, or is it the depressive state of bipolar disorder? What exactly is it? Borderline?
Yeah.
And I would also have a physical, because sometimes physical ailments present as mental health challenges.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. I had a friend here in town who was terribly depressed, and come to find out after a physical, his body wasn't metabolizing iron. So they put him on what they call a time release iron supplement, and bingo, he's back to flying level. So I would do a mental health evaluation, a physical, just in case. If medication's indicated, I would take the doctor, whatever they suggested. However, only 1/3 of psychotropics on average work for everybody.
Yeah.
So there's now a DNA cheek swab test. They take your DNA like Ancestry does, and they try to match your DNA with the antidepressant, let's say, that works best with your metabolism. So there's less of that lab rat, go on, doesn't work, taper off, go on, doesn't work, taper off. It's not perfect, but it's a lot more accurate than
That's
just what the drug salesman told the physician. So,
right.
you know,
Right.
so, and I would let people in your life know,
Yeah.
anybody who you know, love, and trust, let them know what you're going through and what kind of help you may need.
Yes.
People with mental illness are often great actors. I have a Screen Actors Guild card for a reason. I did not come out as depressed and suicidal until I did my first TEDx, and I came out of the mental health closet on that stage as depressed and suicidal. My wife didn't even know.
No.
Well, we hide it. We don't want to burden anybody. Not much you figure anybody else can do. But if they know what's happening and they know what's liable to happen,
Yes.
in the books, I wrote a series of 4 books with 2 co-authors, and we compared the brain to an automobile engine, and it looks like it's for men, and it looks like an automobile owner's manual. And in there's a metaphor. If you're racing NASCAR, you're not going to wait until you roll into the pit to hire a pit crew. You're gonna have them standing by, with the tires and the brakes and oil, so that when something goes wrong,
You're ready to go.
it's like buying a car. Every time I have a car, I have AAA, because I know at some point. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what your family, friends that you know, love, and trust need to know, so that if it melts down,
Right.
how can they support you in that? But again, people with mental illness oftentimes are really shy because of the stigma,
Yeah.
recrimination. So,
Those
um,
are those people who is listening today. I think I'll have Monica put both the US and the Canadian helplines for suicide prevention
yep.
and mental health awareness so that there's at least a number here. But please, please, please reach out to somebody and know that there are people that care about you. So,
Yes, and by the way, that we have the new 3-digit number, 988, for
oh,
the suicide prevention lifeline is now
so
988.
911, it's 988.
Yep.
I didn't know that. Is that all across America?
Uh-huh.
I did not know that. Okay, that's big news to
Well,
me.
here's another one for you.
Okay.
They discovered that younger people, millennials and Gen Z, are more forthcoming in text. So they created a suicide prevention text line. Text the word help to 741-741.
Oh, that's really
There'd be
good.
somebody roughly their age on the other end to text back.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you. Thank you
Mhm.
for providing those, Frank.
Uh, One note for your friend whose daughter is struggling.
Please.
Yes, what there's something in suicidality called burdensomeness. Many
Yes.
people who are thinking of suicide believe they are burdened, and that the world, their family, and the world would be better off without them. It's irrational, but that's the way. I knew my wife would be better off without me because I had $1 million life insurance policy. She would be
Right.
heartbroken, but
Right.
no longer broke.
Right.
So I would recommend that your friend, every now and then, at odd moments, reassure her daughter this way: honey, I know sometimes it probably crosses your mind that we would be better off without you. But in no uncertain terms would we ever
Mm,
be better off without you.
that's really good. That's really good. Thank you, Frank. I
Mhm.
appreciate that very much. Okay, so we're switching
So,
gears now to our topic at hand, and I
well,
really did want to cover that. And apologies for those of you who showed up looking for TED Talk information.
that's
We do have that here for you right now. So,
well, and it dovetails into that, Jane. Um, the After I came so close to killing myself, and I looked back at my family history. Something called generational depression and suicide runs in my family. My grandmother, my great aunt, my mother. As I say in my keynote, more nuts in my family than in a squirrel poop. So,
and you're allowed to say that because why are you allowed to say that, Frank?
because I'm living with 2 mental illnesses, one is major depressive disorder, and the other is chronic suicidal ideation. Uh,
You
in
can
speaking and in comedy, you can make fun of any group to which you belong.
to which you belong. So
Yeah.
just so you know where the lines are in the sand, everybody, we clarified that from
Yes.
Frank's story in the book. I'm like, I think this may offend some people. And you said, well, I'm one of them. So we made sure that I'm
Yeah.
allowed to say that because I'm one of them, got included in the book. Okay. So,
So I'm one of them.
yes,
I've come close to dying by suicide.
yes,
Meeting planners called me and said, look, Frank, we love you. We can't pay you $5,000 just to be funny.
yeah,
You've got to give us some content. You've got to teach our audience something. And I was at a loss.
Yeah, and that was right in that time in when economic shift happened, and all of a sudden, shareholders and stakeholders were starting to demand ROI from their speakers.
Yeah.
And you got caught up in that because you were straight up humor. That was one of the first things cut, and that is why your business had a very difficult time. And that's why today it's no longer kind of as cool to be a straight up motivational speaker. People used to think that that was quite fluffy. You have to have some ROI in there. And now I think most people come at it from that, at least our students do. They come at it from that perspective. They are always thinking, how am I going to help somebody solve a problem, or what's the return on investment for the
Yeah.
buyer? And so you figured out this was your ROI.
Yes. However, I had no, I had always wanted to do that, make a living and a difference.
Mm.
From when I sold insurance and saw Zig and Brian Tracy and all those, I thought I could do that if I just had something to teach people.
Yeah.
So I hope you don't mind. I took your philosophy of pick a lane, and
Mhm.
then I read Judy Carter's book, The Message of You,
Love Judy.
Turning Your Life into a Money Making Speaking Career. And I went into the book thinking I got nothing. And she walks you through the process. And about halfway through, I thought, I got it. I've got a great story. If I could just get a certification in suicide prevention, get trained, I
Yes.
could keynote on suicide prevention. And then the second hurdle was, how do I get meeting planners to believe after 2.5 decades of stand up that I can do something serious?
So now you have to reteach your clients on how to think of you. Whew.
Yep. So my wife said, how about a TED Talk? And I said famously, what's a TED Talk? And she described it. And by chance that week, I got an email from a TEDx up in Vancouver, British Columbia. And they said, we would like you to apply. So
Mm.
I applied and I got it. And that was, and I'm talking about suicide prevention. And so that's a very serious topic. And I was able to prove to everybody that, and then by picking the lane of suicide prevention speaking
Yeah.
and adding humor, I am the mental health comedian. It's kind of an odd combination, but
Yeah.
because of the element of comic relief and because I have lived experience, I can joke about it or tell funny personal stories about it
Yeah.
and get away with it. Um,
Don't you
Somebody
think
said, "Do you not
that?
get booked because you're a comic?" I said, "No, the reverse is true.
Yeah.
They want the humor, the lived experience, and of course, the learning outcomes, the objectives."
Do you think, where do you think we are on the mental health kind of wave? I feel like we're just at the very beginning of the wave, and there's a lot more to come. I would say more so in the US than in Canada. I think in Canada we're a little bit further along. And you've done TED Talks in Vancouver, so perhaps you might have some insight on that.
Well, the I do colleges as well as corporate,
Hmm.
and the last study I saw said that a full 60% of college students self-report anxiety and comorbidities, and 40% of high school students, and that's double what it was 10 years ago.
Mm.
So it's getting worse. My last TED Talk, my seventh one, was digital media addiction, smartphones, social media, and suicide.
Oh
Because
God.
I believe it may not be a correlation or
Uh,
causation, but there is a connection.
100% yes.
Yep. So
And
the
COVID probably amplified that for all those students, especially, don't you think?
yes,
Now
yes,
you're
because
isolated
yeah,
on top of everything else.
isolated, so you're staring in your phone screen or your computer screen far more. And so the good news is that the suicide rate in the U.S. went down 1.5% during the pandemic.
Oh,
They think it's because an extra million people reached out to the suicide prevention lifeline. Maybe they finally figured out that, look, I need help. The only groups that had an increase were teenagers and college students.
wow. Well, for those of you who are dealing with it directly in your families or personally, my heart absolutely goes out to you. COVID has been so difficult, and I don't feel like we're over, the whole thing yet. There's still so much more fallout, and I think even more to come. So, be interesting to see that. But in terms of in terms of your topic, so you've done 7 TEDx talks
Yep.
on this topic with different spins on the topic.
Yes.
So, because TEDx Talks, talk about a little bit about the rules. You can't have given this talk before. Is that a rule?
It is it's not a rule, it's a preference of the TEDx committee. They don't want you to come to their TEDx and do something you did at another TEDx.
Okay.
So
Oh, I see. At another TEDx. But
yeah.
what if you're a professional speaker and you have a talk that's nailed? Can you go and give a TEDx on that talk?
Yes, up to 18 minutes.
Up to 18 minutes. Okay.
And some of the groups aren't fond of professional speakers because a lot of professional speakers figured out it was a great way to brand, promote, so forth.
Yes.
So I'm sure they were flooded with professional speakers. But I don't make any bones about it. I don't lie and say I'm not, I'm whatever. I tell them I'm a professional speaker when I apply.
Okay.
And it's up to each committee as to whether that's okay or not.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So, so what would be the advantage for somebody to want, and I already know, most people know what it is, but what is the biggest advantage of a TEDx talk? Is it simply exposure?
uh, Three things: visibility, credibility, marketability. But
Okay.
prior to that, it actually dovetails with your idea of picking a lane.
Yeah.
The TEDx forces you because it's one idea worth spreading. So when
Mm,
I'm working with my speakers, I say, you have got to pick an idea. And they're not looking at thesis. They want, they want half a dozen learning outcomes or learning objectives and a couple, 3 action items. So it actually causes my speaker clients to focus on what is their number one passion and to do the TED based on that. And then they expand that to a 45-minute keynote. And then we figure out who the ideal clients, who's going to pay them for this. So it helps them pick a lane because
yes.
you have to have a lane to do a TEDx. Otherwise,
Forced. You're forced. And to drill down on one point for 18 minutes is such a good learning process, don't you think? I mean, I think everyone should really do it. Would you say that there's like a part of your speech that could be like your opening story in any 60-minute speech? 18 minutes could be a TEDx, or because it doesn't have the beginning, the middle, and the ending kind of the same way. I don't know. What it,
well, and they'll tell you in the information that you'll read about TEDx, they'll say a story is not a TEDx and a TEDx is not your story. However, your story is part of a TEDx. And most often it goes like this. The first third of the TEDx, how many ever minutes they give you, is your hero or heroine's journey. As Judy Carter would say, your messes and stresses.
okay.
The middle part is, now here's what I learned in all that. And the
Yeah.
last part is, and this is what they ask you at the audition, what are you going to teach the audience? From what you learned and what you went through, what are the learning objectives and action items for the audience? So your story is roughly a third. And each TEDx that I did, my origin story is pretty much the same in each one of
Okay.
them. But there's a different angle. We were talking about Flashpoint. I did one on my Flashpoint. And so I gave my background. So they take me, as a comedian, I always open a keynote with, you're probably wondering, a comedian doing a talk on depression and suicide, how does that work?
Yeah.
So I go through a little bit of my backstory to give me credibility. And
Right.
then I jump in that case, it was my 4th TEDx talk. It was called Suicide, the Secret of My Success,
Hmm.
Dead Man Talking.
Hmm.
And the title and subtitle, by the way, were good enough. I didn't have to audition. They said, no, you're on,
Oh, really? Interesting.
which told me that is the key to getting the audition is they get 100 or 200 applications and you're on the selection committee. You're not looking for a reason to give somebody an audition. You're looking for a reason to throw them in the no pile and go to the next one.
Right.
So when they saw Suicide, the Secret of My Success, which is counterintuitive, and Dead Man Talking, which is a play on Dead Man Walking, they're like, okay, man, this is fine. You're on.
Yeah.
But that was my flashpoint, if I may, as in your book.
So
Where
the
was that?
point is when a speaker's career kind of goes to a new level, just for those of you who haven't refreshed lately on the wealthy speaker.
Yeah, and who hasn't? Jane, come
You
on.
never.
That's, well, and it's rather dramatic, actually. I have major depressive disorder, which is depression, and chronic suicidal ideation, which means for me and people like me, suicide's always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. My
Okay.
car broke down a couple of years ago. I had three thoughts: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. And by the way, when I speak and tell that story, since 2014, there's been at least one person in the audience who has no idea it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak and
Yes.
all alone. I'm telling you, people come up to me afterwards crying. I thought I was all alone, that I heard you say that out loud, the woman said to me, and I wept.
Mm.
There's a little ROI for you.
Hmm.
So, and very therapeutic for me as someone who lives with mental illness. So the, let's see, where was I? The chronic suicidal. Oh, I know. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. It's January of '84.
Right.
I'm married to my high school sweetheart, a wonderful woman, but we did not belong together. We had nothing in common. Opposites attract. She was pregnant, I wasn't. Figure. Um, but and I was selling insurance for her father's company, and it's a great business, but it wasn't for me. And I actually had this thought going down Highway 163 at 5 in the afternoon in January of 1984. Why don't you just kill yourself? And I thought, okay, if I don't make a change or changes and start pursuing comedy, going to the open mics where where I know I belong, I feel like that was what I was born for, then I'm going to kill myself sooner rather than later. My second thought was very empowering. Well, I could divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I can always kill myself.
Hmm.
So that was my flashpoint. I mean, imagine someone who has absolutely nothing to lose by trying this.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if I stayed put, I was going to die.
Yeah.
So
You were literally in a dead end job.
yes, exactly. And it's not uncommon, I believe, for entrepreneurs oftentimes to have a very similar thought process.
Mm-hmm.
They're living a life that they don't think really is theirs, with people they don't think they belong with, and they've got this dream. They know they should be doing something else. And if they don't, they're going to kill themselves. And so that was my flashpoint. I realized, well, I've got nothing to lose. Fortunately, open mic, it worked out. Um, I've been a full-time stand-up comic for 37 years. I must tell you though, I've thought about writing a keynote called "What Could You Do If You Didn't Know No Better?" Because I had no idea how hard it was to make a living doing stand-up comedy.
Oh. Well, stand-up comics, I've known a few of them, obviously, who've crossed over to the light side because it's so hard. It's such a grind. Give us the just very quickly, and then we need to go into more TED Talk stuff here. Give us the difference between stand-up comedy and the professional speaking circuit. And you alluded to it earlier, but
Yes, it pays a whole lot better.
mhm.
And Judy Carter,
Yes.
and this is why I bought the book. Frank, you need to go from funny speaker to speaker who is funny. Keep that skill set, but add content.
Right.
And the difference again is a good comic who nobody knows who they are could make maybe 250, 300 a night.
Okay, so that's what I was after, some actual
Yeah,
dollar figures.
1,500 a week if they're headlining. And,
200 a week.
I make more than that in the first 15 minutes of my keynote.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy. It's just,
Commas and zeros.
yeah, I tell my clients, look, when I tell them what I think they should be charging as a base, my clients, I say, look, start at 5 grand plus travel.
Mhm.
And then practice in the mirror in the bathroom saying this: 5,000 plus travel, 5 grand plus travel, 5K plus travel. So it just rolls off your tongue.
Yes.
You can charge less, but quote retail. So that's again why speaking and comedy, you're at their club. You're just one of, unless you are famous, they didn't come to see you.
Yes.
When you do a corporate engagement, the committee has selected you. They're paying you a great deal of money to speak, and the audience, you're kind of the star of the show.
Yes.
And so and the accommodations and the travel. I mean, I'm a traveling coach, but I'm at oftentimes like the Phoenician, some 5-star hotel with a free bathrobe or something. Every
Beautiful.
now and then, I'll take a picture of my room before I put my bags on the bed, and I'll put it up on Facebook, and I'll say, if you are my age and you're still doing clubs, you may be doing it wrong.
Yeah, and and maybe the picture is with the Motel 6 next to it to the
Yeah.
like, okay, I recognize that you had to pay your dues, but you did pay your dues, and you're here and you're on the circuit, and sometimes you get the red carpet rolled out for you, and I'm sure sometimes not exactly. But let's talk about um, you have to apply for a TEDx event. Talk about that, and then how do you score an audition?
Yes, you have to apply. There are application links. However, TED does not make it easy to find them. Uh,
Okay, we bury them.
yes, if you go to for your audience, go to TED.com
Okay,
forward slash TEDx forward slash events,
okay,
and you will find and you put in the region, US, month, let's say February, because there's always a long lead up, and
okay.
then 2023. You will find all the ones in the US in February.
Oh,
But what you won't find is a link to apply. They
okay.
make it that extra step, I think, to discourage people. You
Yes,
really have to,
tire kickers. So how do
yeah.
you find it?
Well, you take, let's say it's TEDx Nashville. You copy and paste that into another Google window, and you
Mhm.
look for TEDxNashville.com or TEDxNashville.org or their Facebook page, where it's an actual, it's actually their site. And oftentimes at their site, they'll say, apply to speak.
Okay.
Here's another trap. Sometimes they'll say nominate a speaker. And I think they do that because people go, well, who am I get to nominate me? Well, here's something they don't tell you. You can always nominate yourself.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so you're looking for apply or nominate yourself potentially.
Yep.
And that's very helpful just to know that you can go and look at all the events. That is a very cool. We're going to put that link. Let's say it again, and I'll have Monica put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's TED.com
Okay.
forward slash TEDx forward slash events plural. And that way you can sort by region and by month. I've got a client in Toronto. So the other day we went looking and we went to the official page, TEDx.com forward slash TEDx forward slash events. And sure enough, there's one in May, I think,
Okay.
already come and gone. But we went to the Google machine and there's a TEDxToronto.com. And so I said, look, why don't you do this? Subscribe to their email list so that next year when the window opens for application, they send you a
Yes.
link to apply.
Okay.
So anytime you go to a TEDx site, an actual website, then I would subscribe
Okay.
to their email list because that way you'll know when and I provide my clients with a list of half dozen every couple of weeks. I call them and check them out, make sure that the link's still good,
Oh, that's
and
good.
make sure that the window's open for application,
Okay.
and they
Nice,
apply.
that's a nice service. Okay. So you have applied. Will they let you know if you have scored an audition, or is there another thing that we can be proactive about auditions?
There is unfortunately, it's hard to get a no. Oftentimes you'll never hear back.
Oh,
I think if I were on the selection committee and I know how much work it is to fill out an application and get it in, that I would just send them a nice form letter. We had so many people, and we're sorry.
yeah.
Please apply next year.
Yeah.
But if you get the audition, and there's actually a half step in there. 3 of my clients this last couple of months, they sorry about the cat crying in the background. One of our 9 cats, rescue
Got
cats.
cats going on, and we
Yes.
just had a parcel delivered to the door. It's a miracle we didn't have dog barking. So there you go. This is
There you
just
go.
cats and
Welcome to Zoom.
dogs. Okay. So
So
there's a half step.
yeah, the half step was they said, look, we like your idea. You stated the problem really well. What you don't have, what we want you to tell us is the how, what you're going to tell them is going to solve that problem.
Okay.
So they actually gave them a chance to apply essentially again with more how.
Okay.
And they gave a couple of links to TEDx Talks they thought did a really good job of doing that, and which I forwarded to all my clients and said, look, this is kind of what they're looking for. You know your story, the problem, but you got to have the how. What's the
Okay.
solution?
That's really good. Okay. So what is expected of you at an audition?
Oftentimes they will say you've got an audition. well, there is another half step. I'm sorry.
Oh,
They oftentimes will say, please send us a 5-minute overview. Usually with the application, they want a 60 to 90-second overview that you did on Zoom. They'll say, let's have a 5-minute overview. 5 minutes, by the way, is 800 words at a
five
time.
minutes of your talk? Is that what you're
You can do 5 minutes of your actual talk,
doing? Okay.
which is what I did in Vancouver to get the first one, or you can do a 5-minute overview of the talk.
So you're just talking about the talk?
Yep, you're talking about the talk.
Okay.
And 160 words per minute is the pace you want, 160 words per minute. So that 5 minutes is 800 words.
Hmm.
So I'll ask my clients, write me up a script for 5 minutes. If it goes over 800 words, don't worry about it. I'll edit it down to 800 words so that and be very careful. If they say 5 minutes, they don't mean 5 minutes and 1 second. They mean five, because if you go over, it may tell them you can't follow directions.
Right.
And
And you do not want to go over during your actual TEDx talk. Like that is the biggest no-no. It's a no-no on any stage.
yep,
Let's just say that for sure. But on the TED or TEDx stage, it's a massive no-no, right?
yes. And TED has 3 choices with your TEDx. They can post it with an editorial note if they disagree with something,
Ooh.
or they cannot post it.
Hmm. That would
And
be
I've had 3
tragic.
talks not posted, not because I went over. I'm not sure really why, because they won't tell you and they won't edit it.
Hmm.
The best talk I ever gave was in Durango, Colorado. I got a standing ovation.
Wow. And they won't
Uh,
post it?
it was called, and again, I didn't have to audition. They liked the title so much. It was
Yeah.
called Mental Health and the Orgasm, Treat Your Depression Single-Handedly. And they loved it. And the crowd loved it. It was full of facts about the healthful benefits of,
Oh my.
so there was some, takeaways for the audience about how healthful these things are, lowering your blood pressure, your cortisol, prostate cancer, less chance, I mean, it was a lot of stuff in the talk, but a lot of funny, of course.
Oh yes, and but you must have said something that crossed a line. I mean, that one is fraught with danger, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I knew that, and they knew that. That's why they put me right before lunch, because they said, Frank, we want to have a talk right before lunch that everybody will be talking about at lunch, and
At
this is perfect.
lunch, and that worked.
Yes, and so what I recommend, and what I did on my last one,
Hmm.
is I offered to donate a videographer to the event. I was going to hire them and have them record in 4K, a professional videographer, the entire event and turn over the entire raw footage to the committee so that everybody's video on YouTube would be just that much better.
Mhm.
And I would have a copy. And I can't put it up on YouTube because they would catch that, but I can put it on my Venmo and use it for marketing. So I would recommend, because they have those choices, I would recommend donating a videographer if you're going to do a TEDx.
Okay, okay. Um, you get picked, then I'm assuming they're going to give you emails with details on what to expect and how to prepare and things like that. What are some things that people might not know is going to be a directive from
Well,
the
and once you get the, if you do your 5 minutes and you add the hows and you get the audition, then they do a live Zoom chat with the selection committee. The
okay?
one question they always ask is, "Great idea, Jane. Now, what are you going to teach our audience?"
Yes.
Second question they always ask, they're terrified of junk science. So if you quote a fact or figure, like 60% of college students self-report anxiety. Okay, Frank, where did that come from? So I have my clients make a list of links if they're going to quote a fact, a figure, a percentage, or whatever. Or if you make a statement, people who meditate live longer. Okay, where did you find that?
Okay.
And then the local committee will ask you for that. And then before TED posts it on YouTube, chances are they'll come back and say, let's take a look at those links again, making sure that what you quoted is actually something that's legitimate.
Okay.
Now, let's say you lucky enough, they usually select 3 or 4 dozen people to audition, and then they select 12 to 15 to actually be on the stage.
Okay.
They assign you a volunteer coach. So the volunteer coach and I and you work on your TEDx to
Okay.
make it as good as absolutely possible.
All right.
And then, and by the way, on many TEDx applications, let's say it was TEDx Toronto and I applied and they asked me, Frank, can you be in Toronto on November 15th for an organizational meeting? I check yes. because I've never actually had to fly to an organizational meeting because they understand you're coming in by Zoom because you live in Oregon. You're not going to be. So, but I think they do that to trip people up. I can't be in Toronto on November 15th. Anything they ask you, check yes. Check
Okay.
yes, check
Just
yes.
be agreeable and then work it out on the back end.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I like that they fact check because I have a big issue with people spreading things that aren't fact checked.
Yes.
I don't mind that actually makes the organization it goes up a level in my eyes. Okay. What kind of speaker or idea may get rejected out of hand? This is
uh,
my
per,
last question, and then I want to make sure we'll offer up. We'll make sure that if people want to know how to get in touch with you, they can do that.
well, they are, and this is stated in the boilerplate information that the Big TED gives the TEDx folks.
Hmm.
They're not looking. They're not looking for professional speakers. Not
Yeah.
to say they won't book one,
Yes.
but that could be a red flag for them. They're not looking for motivational speeches or inspirational speeches. Now you get an inspirational story,
Hmm.
but they're not looking for motivational, inspirational, and personal development. And if you're doing a TEDx application, I would avoid the word coach
Okay.
altogether.
Okay.
I would because what do you do for a living? I would figure out a way to say it without saying the word coach,
Okay.
because every coach and their sister and brother would like to have a TEDx, it seems like. And so they are, again, that bleeds into personal development. Now, I have speakers who do that, and we have gotten them TEDx. The trick is in how you fill out the application. You have to hide the vegetables. You have to give them the meat they're looking for and then shove the vegetables underneath so they don't really notice that you're a
Blend
coach.
them up in the blender. Okay.
Exactly. Puree the vegetables so it's all just part of meatloaf.
All right.
Yes. And may I say this? Most of the TEDx companies, coaching companies, and there are good ones, and I've yet to come across one that was a scam, actually.
Okay.
They usually do an Zoom individually, one on one once, and then everything after that is filling out forms in group Zooms. My business model is we do an hour a week on Zoom together, one on one, filling out one or two applications each week because it's a bit of a numbers game.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I discovered about a year in, Jane, that most of my clients were speakers. And so included in my little package is if you want to use this to up your game in speaking or start your speaking career, we work on the speaker marketing nuts and bolts. Do you have a website? Do you have a one pager? Do you have a demo video? Just to get them turnkey ready for meeting planners.
Right.
The other TEDx coaching companies, when they get you the TEDx, that's what they do. Here's your TEDx. It's up on YouTube. Have a great life.
Right.
But since I work with speakers, I can't just leave. I can't. And my program, Jane, I call it "Till Death Do Us Part."
Okay, tell me how people can get in touch. What's the best website for them to go to learn more about how you do your work?
It's your TEDxcoach.com.
YourTEDxCoach.com. Okay, I said final question earlier, but I'm gonna give you one more. What's the best number one quickest way to leverage a TEDx talk?
Well, if you have the money, I have a contact who I've used personally. I always vet my vendors
Uh-huh.
who can get you 1 million legitimate views on YouTube. Now, not many, if any, conversions, but bragging rights. First line of your bio. His TED Talk got 1 million views. First line of your introduction. His TED Talk got 1 million views. I mean, so it is possible to
There's
buy legitimate views from a legitimate company.
all right.
Second thing is I would put the little TEDx postage stamp with your red letters in the background on your website, and I would make sure that when you do a sizzle reel, that clip, part of that leads your sizzle reel, so they see the TEDx thing right away.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I think that it definitely adds credibility for people. And you use three terms: visibility, credibility, and marketability. And I
Mhm.
think it's very, very valid. Frank King, thank you so much. You have given us so much juicy and insider information here today. I really, really appreciate it. And just really thank you for being on the show today.
Well, Jane, let's face it. I am successful as a suicide prevention speaker because I did a Jane Atkinson thing. I picked a lane.
Yes, you did. I'm very, very happy that that has paid off for you, Frank. And if those of you who haven't really quite yet done that, I'm hoping that this is a good testimonial towards doing it. And I also hope that you'll go out and get a TEDx talk because it really does help you start to bring your ideas into focus
And niche.
and niche. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening in. And with that, we will say, see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now, everyone.